Over on Jaguar a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a bizarre broadcasting controversy involving ABC, Wyoming, and UTEP during the 1988 college football season. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. A few weeks ago, I made a video about a bizarre incident in Super Bowl XXX between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys, where people were having trouble viewing the game, and a controversy ensued because of it. If you want to learn more about that, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, in short, there was one city in Idaho that was supposed to get the game, and then the power to the NBC affiliate went out, along with all of its backups, meaning that no one was able to watch, and no one was even able to listen on the radio, because the only stations airing the game were daytime-only radio stations, and they couldn't air the fourth quarter. It was a really bad incident that left a lot of people in Idaho fuming. However, odds are, unless you actually live there, you probably had no idea what it was until I brought it up. It's not like this happened at the Super Bowl itself and screwed over people at the game. However, today's story? Not so much. Because if I had a nickel for every time a Steelers-Cowboys Super Bowl on NBC left people outraged because they weren't able to watch the game when they were promised that they would be able to, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Because 17 years after the last meeting between the teams in the big game, the two teams once again squared off for the Vince Lombardi Trophy, with each team looking to win their coveted 5th title ever, and join the San Francisco 49ers as the only teams in NFL history with 5 rings. And if you wanted to watch the game in Arizona right outside of Sun Devil Stadium, where the game was actually taking place, you were straight out of luck thanks to some horrible planning on the part of everyone involved, and it left some people, I kid you not, vowing to never visit the state of Arizona again. Because this is the story behind the absolute disaster at Super Bowl XXX. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context to understand what the original game plan was. And to do this, let's talk about another Steelers-related Super Bowl that happened a decade and a half later at Super Bowl XLV, so you get an idea of what was supposed to happen. There was a ton of controversy surrounding the organization of the game, from the seat fiasco, to ice falling off of the stadium, to everything else. However, one thing that drew some attention was the rather bizarre way that people could watch the game. Because for the low price of $200, you could be there in person and watch Super Bowl XLV unfold at Cowboys Stadium, outside, on a grass area on the east side of the stadium, while watching a TV screen. That's right, you could watch the game on a giant TV, so you're at the game, but you're not technically at the game. People actually paid money to do this and sit in the freezing cold to watch a game on a TV screen, just so they could experience the atmosphere to some extent of being at the Super Bowl. Now, the reason why they did this was to try and break the attendance record at Super Bowl XIV, which did not happen, so in that regard, this was a failure. But for the most part, everyone who did this knew exactly what they were getting into, and they had a good time, getting what they were advertised. It's not like they were promised that they could watch the game on a giant screen outside the stadium, and then the screen turned off and ticked off everyone, leaving them with no device whatsoever to watch the game. Which takes us to the game in our story, Super Bowl XXX. The Super Bowl down in Tempe was special for a few reasons. Number 1, it was the first Super Bowl ever held in Arizona. But number 2, which is what makes this story a million times crazier and more bizarre, they had extra time to prepare for it than a city usually does, since they were originally supposed to host Super Bowl XXVII, but lost the game due to the state's failure to recognize Martin Luther King Day as a national holiday. That game was given to Arizona in 1990, and this Super Bowl was taking place in 1996, meaning that Arizona had more than half a decade to get ready for this game, and make sure all of their logistical kinks were in order. Yeah, so much for that. There were a ton of problems with the Super Bowl in the build-up to the game. from Sun Devil Stadium lacking any of the amenities needed to host the game, leading to ridiculously long lines at concession stands throughout the 1995 season, to the playing surface being a mess. But for the purposes of this story, the one we're talking about today has to do with an idea that seems brilliant on paper, and then really stupid once you take 5 seconds to think about it. Because of how Sun Devil Stadium is situated, where it's within walking distance of everything in Tempe due to its position on the campus of Arizona State University, it's easily accessible to the public. It's not like MetLife Stadium or SoFi Stadium or Levi's Stadium, where you have to go out of your way in order to access it. It's more like a lot of baseball stadiums and basketball arenas, where if you're downtown, you're going to see it or be near it. Because of this, there is a ton of foot traffic to be found. So to drum up excitement for the game, and during the game, what if officials installed a giant 20-foot television screen outside the stadium so that people could watch the game? You could have a ton of people experience the thrill of the Super Bowl by being at the game without actually being at the game. It would do wonders for the local economy too. You'd have people going to nearby bars before the game and after the game. You'd be able to sell concessions right outside the stadium. And you'd be able to make a ton of money while people sit and stand outside to watch the magic unfold on a TV screen. You could get a lot of people at this game without them having to pay money. And in theory, this sounds like a really good idea. However, there's one major flaw with this if you know anything about how Sun Devil Stadium works and how it looks. And to demonstrate this, here's an aerial shot of Sun Devil Stadium before the game. For the purposes of this, I'm going to use the cardinal directions as per the picture, and not what they actually are in reality. Now if you notice, the main entry point to the stadium is up some staircases and to this end zone here. You can't enter through the south sideline because there's a mountain covering it. You can't enter through the north sideline because there's also a mountain covering it. And you can't enter through the west end zone because, surprise, there's a mountain covering it. This makes Diana Ross's halftime show, where she exited in a helicopter, all the more remarkable, because to this day, every time I pass the stadium and go there, I have no idea how they pulled that off. Anyways, there's pretty much one entrance to the stadium, and it's the only place that's not covered by elevated terrain. Which raises the question, where are these people going to watch the game outside on the TV screen? You have to do it in a location that can be accessed by pedestrians. And again, you want to do this outside the stadium so that the fans can get a feel for what it's like to be at the game without necessarily having tickets to the game. That's the whole point of this. So the north sideline is out because you have a giant mountain. The south sideline is out because you have a giant mountain. And the west end zone is out because of a giant mountain. That leaves one spot left, and that's the east end zone, which also happens to be, where people are trying to get to the game. And you can see exactly where the TV is lined up in this shot right here. And you can clearly see where the problem arises. So now, you've got people who have tickets to the game, who need to walk through an area, and you've got people who are in that area just standing around because they have to, as part of the viewing party outdoors. And for 6 whole years, plus maybe more since planning started well before 1990, since they had to submit a bid, so for nearly a whole decade, no one, not one person, ever thought to themselves, hey, wait a second, this might be a problem. No one thought to themselves after all that time, and even after seeing how many people showed up to the NFL experience, where lines were 3 hours long just to get in, and 45 minutes long just to sign a waiver, that this wouldn't be an issue. I'll put it like this. Imagine if you're at Disney World, and they're doing a castle show on the Magic Kingdom stage. However, for some bizarre reason, every single land beside Main Street USA and Fantasyland is closed, which means the only way to make it through to Fantasyland is through the castle. That means you got people standing still in one spot, and people moving forward in that same spot, with both parties being in the right. Except now, add drunkenness on top of it, and you've got Super Bowl XXX. You've got thousands upon thousands of fans crowding outside the stadium without a ticket, while tens of thousands of fans are trying to get into the stadium who have a ticket, and the ticketless fans are blocking the ticketed fans and making life a nightmare for them due to poor logistical planning. And many people, like Diana Russell and Ginger Allen, wanted to be outside the stadium because this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, with the two saying, "We wanted to be right in the middle of all the excitement. Right now, this is the wild, wild west, and we wanted to be in it." Oh, it was about to get a heck of a lot wilder. Trust me. Because once officials realized that they had a massive problem on their hands, with pedestrian traffic being all over the place, and with some fans missing kickoff who had tickets because they couldn't get through the mob of people watching the game outside the stadium, they decided that the best way to stop the problem was to just stop showing the game. And with that, you can imagine how people reacted when midway through the first quarter, the TV was turned off, leaving thousands upon thousands of people who thought they'd be able to watch the Super Bowl unable to watch it. Fans were confused, then angry when the TV started showing generic sponsorship graphics, including one that said, "Ad art welcomes NFL fans. Enjoy the game," which is tough to do, seeing as they literally cannot watch the game. And when I say the fans were outraged, I truly mean it. I mean, imagine if you camped out to watch the game outside the stadium because the NFL and city officials set it up that way. And then, they turned it off because they realized it was a bad idea. Beer cans were thrown and were kicked at police officers. Extra law enforcement was brought in to clear out the crowd, but that only made things worse. Some people tried getting into local bars and establishments to watch the game, which, if you know anything about Mill Avenue, they had plenty of options, although they were probably all packed to the bone. Some held out hope for as long as possible. Some just gave up and drove back to wherever they came from. One resident of Phoenix, Todd Lintern, said on this, "Phoenix should be ashamed. This is a complete embarrassment." Others echoed those thoughts by Lintern. One of those people was Robert Handy, a Steelers fan and a Tucson resident who spent the entire day in Tempe getting ready to watch his team play, but spent the second half listening to the game on the radio as he drove back to Tucson. One person, Karen Makalovic, drove 3 days from Pittsburgh to Tempe just to be outside the stadium to see her Steelers play, only to be understandably disappointed when she wasn't able to see the game, saying, "We're going to drive out of the state tonight. We're not even going to stay here." She vowed never to return to Arizona again. You might as well call her Jamie O'Neal, because in her mind, from that point on, there was no Arizona. And another person who made the trek to outside Sun Devil Stadium, Twyla Moreau, was just as furious, saying, "I took my daughter out of school. I said you'd have the memories forever. Now, she'll have the memories of not seeing the game." Yeah, no one was thrilled about this decision, and understandably so. And the worst part about all of this was because of how preventable this entire thing was. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that this was going to be a problem from a traffic flow perspective. If you have a group of people standing still, and you have a second group of people that are moving, and you put them in the same place, there are going to be congestion issues. It's the same reason why, if hypothetically, you drove a car and had to get from point A to point B, you would get there faster if all the cars were going in the same direction, versus if all the cars on the highway were just parked, and you had to maneuver around each and every one of them. Seriously, the more you read and hear about Super Bowl XXX, the more you realize just how much of a disaster it was from a logistical standpoint. Because to say that Tempe, and by extension, Phoenix, were not ready for this, would be putting it lightly. Because for this Super Bowl, we actually found people who had it worse than Neil O'Donnell did. 'Tis better to have watched your team lose in the Super Bowl than it is to never have watched the Super Bowl at all. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.